Ready? Okay. So, welcome to the Manchester SEO podcast. This is the 10th episode, which is a bit of a milestone. One we didn't think we'd ever get to, but seems to have happened. Today, we're really privileged to be joined by Sara Starling. Some say the vocal queen of marketing.
Do they? That's news to me, but very nice. Thank you.
Welcome, Sara.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Tell us a bit about yourself and what you do.
That's a big question. So I'm a voiceover artist by trade.
Yes.
I started my career back in the dark ages when there were dinosaurs and all sorts of things walking the earth. So I did a drama degree years ago. Okay. And I was always told from being a kid when I wanted to work for the BBC that I would never do that. It was impossible. Yeah. And when I went to university and did my drama degree, I was also told, you'll never work for the BBC. And I thought, okay, let's see, shall we? One of those questions that either puts fire in your belly or squishes you. Yeah. And for me, it put fire in my belly. So I applied for a couple of jobs and had interviews, and I was offered the job as a radio studio manager the day I sat my finals. So I went straight from university to the BBC as a radio studio manager or sound engineer. Wow. And it was a great job. We had a great time. We had an absolute ball. And I did that job for about 5 years. Mm. And I remember somebody saying to me, if you don't move after 5 years, you will be stuck in this job. Yeah. And I knew that I wanted to be the other side of the mic. Sure. And I happened to meet somebody at a wedding. I was a bridesmaid for a mutual friend. Wow. And she was telling me about the job that she was doing in telly. And I thought, God, that sounds great. And she said, well, I need to move away from that back to radio. And I said, well, I can help you with that if you can help me with this. So we kind of swapped places. And I moved across to telly. Wow. Yeah. Synchronicity. Yeah. I moved across to telly as an announcer and read the news, out of vision, and sat in front of a massive mixing desk and transmitted programmes and all the interstitials between programmes, vision mixed and directed news bulletins and all sorts of things. And I did that across TV and radio for about 15, 20 years. Wow. And then in 2006, I decided it was time to make the leap, because for me, voicing and words and scripting and all that kind of stuff was the bit I loved the most. Yeah. And in that role, there was an awful lot of other stuff. So I made the leap and I set up my own studio, and I've been working for clients all over the world since 2006. So people like Bosch, Mercedes, BMW, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, PepsiCo, Ocado.
Just a few
big
on. Names.
Yeah.
I think we've spoken about this previously, where I felt that I first saw you, it was during COVID, and you were comparing a big networking group. Yeah. And I thought, she's got a good voice. And then I looked up what you did on LinkedIn. I was like, well, that makes sense. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, your voice sounds very familiar. And
there's no escape, James. I'm really sorry.
It must have been a time on TV there, or radio or whatever, where your voice has been there. But you mentioned you'd done voiceovers for like Answer Machine.
Oh gosh, yeah, I do loads. Well. I mean, thousands and thousands of on holds. Yeah. And sometimes a friend will phone me up and say, I was having to listen to you today while I was on the phone to so-and-so. Yeah, some people think, it doesn't matter, or it's small fry. But at the end of the day, you're the voice of that brand, and it really matters. And it matters to the person who's on the other end of the phone as well. I had somebody message me a while ago. They had to phone up a funeral parlour, and they were really stressed and upset. And they said, it was really lovely to hear your voice because it was so comforting. So these things matter, even when you think, it's only that. It's never only that. Mm.
It's amazing how you can turn off radio shows when there's a different presenter because you don't like the voice.
Yeah.
Or, it must be the same for brands.
Absolutely. I am doing a guest lecture at Manchester Metropolitan Uni next week, and one of the things I'm going to talk about is what makes you switch off. And what makes me switch off is bad sound quality, but also, either a monotonous voice or one where the stress is all wrong, because when the stress is all wrong, you can't pick up the gist of the story. You miss it.
Obviously you're the voice of our animated explainer video, which I really wanted. I wanted you on there because of the voice and the tone, which I liked, but also we talk a lot about the humanity side of things, the experience of a person or a business that it's usually when we're talking about artificial intelligence and AI and the things that doesn't bring. And we gave you at the time, we should have got you involved a bit sooner, as you do when you don't really know what you're doing. But I gave you the worst script ever to go off, and then you used your experience and everything that you knew, and it came back 10, 20 times better than I thought it would. The experience and doing things for different brands and everything, it really makes a difference.
It makes a huge difference, and an experience comes on all sorts of different levels, because as you've talked already about humanity, experience comes from life, and I guess I've got a lot of life experience, good, bad, difficult, life, death, everything, and that's stuff that you have to draw on. If I'm doing a piece that requires real compassion, there are all sorts of experiences that I'll draw on that AI can't. And equally, I've worked with, vast numbers of scripts over the years, and I've seen brilliant and I've seen really not brilliant. Quite often those really not brilliant are written by clients themselves.
Yes.
So, no, but you had a copywriter involved. Fair play. So you get to know what works, and also as somebody who listens to a lot of things and watches a lot of things, I know what really hits me in the guts and what doesn't. So it's a combination of professional experience, life experience, and interest in that stuff. Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned the lecture you're giving, but what is, it's like what keeps people interested. We talk about that a lot with content, so textual and visual, especially online, and with SEO and with social media. And I'm wondering, I'm asking a question that's probably no real direct answer, but when we're discussing about what keeps people interested vocally, is there any kind of tips or thoughts you have on that?
I think it probably comes down to several things, really. I think it always comes down to the script. I mean, if you're working from a script, if you're not, obviously it comes down to the story.
Sure.
And a structure to that story, a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a hook to draw people in.
Sure.
And depending on the subject matter, and very much depending on the audience and who they are and what it's about, will dictate the tone to an extent. So it's getting the tone right for the subject matter and for your audience. And, depending on whether you need to whip up excitement, whether you want to inspire somebody, whether you want to reassure them, you've got to get the tone right, because otherwise you'll alienate them. So that's really important. And the pace and the pitch and the tone, all of those things can either draw people in or, make them switch off. So you have to think first and foremost about your audience, and you also have to think about how you want them to feel. That's what lies at the crux of so much of this stuff, is that question, how do I want my audience to feel? Because that's what people will remember. They won't remember all of the words that you spoke, but they will remember how you made them feel.
We always talk about user in the office, about user generated signals, and those things are things like how long does someone look at a page, or do they listen to a video, do they look at a picture, and the voiceover for explaining a video or an advert or anything like that can really affect that and affect how far it goes on social media or how well it ranks.
Absolutely. I mean, we often talk in the industry about show reels for all sorts of different genres, and really people will make up their mind about whether you're the right voice for them within seconds. I mean, within 2 or 3 seconds. So I would hope it's a little bit longer in the outside world, but it's that time window is not long. It's not long. Yeah.
And so you must have had a very wide variety of work. You kind of touched on that. Are there any kind of jobs you can think about where you've thought, how did I end up doing this? But not so much in a bad way, but as in, I can't believe I'm doing this.
Yes, I have. Oh gosh, yes, I have. I really have. Yeah, I mean, there are obviously companies and brands that you really want to work with, and you don't quite know how it will ever happen, but sometimes it does. Yeah. So about a year ago, I did a lovely piece for Netflix, and it was a promotion basically for the next series of Vikings, and it was a really, really fun piece. Yeah. So there were extracts of visuals and so on, and Vikings going rah, rah, rah. And then there was me as a voiceover interacting with them, which was really fun. Oh, wow. But basically the Netflix thing was that there would be a recipe to go with each series. Okay. So there was a particular recipe of a snack that you could make, to eat while you were watching Vikings. Right. So it's a really, really fun piece. Yeah. And it came about because a few years previously, I had worked with a producer, and he'd helped put together a video reel for me, and we got on really well, and be like, it'd be lovely to work together sometime. I'm sure it will happen. He's like, oh my God, I've got something I think you'll be perfect for. Can you do an audition for me? Yes. And then they liked it. So yeah, that was really fun.
That's amazing. I've seen quite a few interactive things recently on Netflix, and I'm amazed by the technology. And you start thinking about the recording in the background, and then must have taken ages to create. Any more?
Yeah, I mean, the first time when I first got into the BBC and did my first announcement, that was a big deal. Yeah.
That's really interesting, because we talk about we were talking about cold calling and sales.
I hate it.
And that was in the second episode with Bryn, and we talked about the reframing the worry to excitement about, and how you go about doing that. The first thing you do when you're in a proper job, the one that you want, and there's kind of a lot more pressure on that, isn't there?
Yeah, inevitably you put pressure on yourself because you build it up in your mind. Oh my goodness, it's this brand or this client, or there are sometimes I've got people on the line listening in, so there may be an agency listening in, there may be a director, there may be sound engineer, there can be 10, 15 people sometimes, and so it is quite a performance on occasions, even though I'm in my little safe cubby hole. and yes, so if it's for a big brand or somebody that you really, really want to work with, inevitably you put that pressure on yourself to be as brilliant as you would like to be for that client.
That can come out in your voice though, can't it?
It can, but I always warm up first. And also, you will usually do a couple of reads for level and to warm up and to get into the script, especially if you're working with an experienced director.
Yeah, or more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a physical. You don't think about voicing and speaking as being a physical thing, but it really is. It does involve the whole body, and if you're tense, or your shoulders are tense, or your neck's tense, it comes out in your voice. So if I'm feeling really tense, or I'm advising somebody who wants to voice something or is presenting something, one of the things I say is lie down on the floor. Because if you lie down on the floor, everything relaxes and softens. So I always warm up, and I think I was saying that I voiced a really nice script recently for a big conference for all the major oil and gas companies with a really, really experienced director. I mean, this guy's been directing for 45 years, and he directed a load of spitting image stuff and all sorts. And so he sent me the script, which was very well written, and I asked him if he was using any music, and if he was, could he please send it to me, which he did. And not only that, he sent me all the timings for where the voiceover fitted and where the music came up and where the music went down. And once I heard the music, I knew exactly what tone he wanted. So this is one of the things I say to people. If you can't, or you're not used to directing, or you find it difficult to put what you want into words, send a piece of music that communicates that tone. It can be so useful.
Sure. Music can inspire feelings as well, which is what you were talking about before.
Absolutely.
That'll probably give you an idea as to the...
Yeah. And sometimes, sometimes in a script it's really obvious what that tone will be, and it's obvious from the client as well. Yeah. But not always, and sometimes people want something that actually conflicts with that tone, so you can't assume anything. Yeah.
Sounds like there's a huge, before the project that you have, that you probably have to do a lot of discovery.
Yes. I mean, sometimes you do, and if it's a brand I'm not so familiar with, I will have a little look at websites and what's written on the website and what it feels like, what the logo looks like, and all of that stuff, and get some sort of idea of their ethos and where they sit and how they like to project themselves, because that gives me quite a lot of information.
Sure.
Sometimes there is no time. And it will be literally an email or a phone call. Can you do this and send this back in 10 minutes? Yeah. Well. And that's where 20 years in live broadcasting comes in really handy, because I'm used to turning stuff around fast. Yeah.
So we talk a lot with guests about I'm fascinated by how childhood or your experience in life then relates to what you do now and how that's housed. Was there any clues growing up that you would use your voice as a job?
That's a really interesting question. I think I'd say two things in answer to that. The first is I lived a lot in my imagination. And I'm not a lovey. I'm not, a dramery kind of a person. I'm quite quiet, actually. And I think one of the most important things, actually, when you're a voiceover artist, is to be able to listen. That comes first, always. So I've always been somebody who listens. But my aunt had a boyfriend when I was about, 6 or 7, who arrived in a sports car and was a DJ, and he was doing some bits of work for Radio 1 and various radio stations. And he came with a pile of records, and it was all really exciting. And it sparked something in me, excuse me, just as it did the first time I saw a play at the theatre. It sparked something in me, and I felt something in my gut that was like, oh my God, I need to do this. So I had my first recorded request on Radio 1 when I was about 6 or 7. And that was the beginning.
Radio played a huge part for people, didn't it? And I was listening to the lyrics. I was talking to, I'm going to waffle now for a long time, which is a habit of mine. We're talking about the power of words, and I was relating it to your brand and how you talk about your business and what you do and how the words are important. And then Radio Gaga came on, and it was talking about and I was listening to the lyrics thinking I've never really listened to the lyrics, and how it was his only friend through teenage nights, and in those days it was a big part of everyone's household and atmosphere and everything that went on. So it doesn't surprise me that for a lot of people it can spark interest and ambition.
Well, there were far fewer channels then, weren't there?
Yeah.
I mean, there were far fewer radio stations. There was no internet. There were far fewer TV stations and everything. Yeah. So it was a big deal. It was a big part of the culture. It was how, what did you listen to? Or what did you watch? Who are you listening to at the moment? It was all of that stuff. Yeah. It was, and it's personal. Radio is personal. It's a relationship. It's a little box, or it used to be a little box in your home, and it's somebody talking to you and keeping you company and sparking things in your imagination. It's got a very specific place, I think. Radio and audio. It can do things that TV and cinema can't.
On the way, I was listening to a podcast. There's a surprise, isn't it? Russell Howard, famous comedian Russell Howard.
Yeah.
He has a podcast called Wonderbox where he gets people to put in all the things they find joy out of. And being on stage. And obviously they're both comedians, and how telling a story can tell a lot more from words from a picture. So instead of, you could take a picture, but you couldn't grasp the sheer hilarity of my Uncle Paddy pulling John onto the dance floor and making him dance when he didn't want to, and telling the story and how words are so important with that. And I was relating that to something you'd said, so yeah.
Yeah, and timing is really important. You can't get timing from a picture, from visuals, and comic timing, vital. And
you mentioned the feeling. You said you can't. It's very difficult to get the feeling of something, or the humour from just a standstill picture.
Yeah,
you can from some, but
you can. Yeah.
So the power of words is kind of what I was getting at. When you set up by yourself, did you have any clients already set up, or was it purely a blank piece of paper and where do I get work from?
It's really interesting, that question, because people make all sorts of assumptions. Because I'd worked at the BBC for 18 years, they assume you've already got a client base, but actually I hadn't. I had been asked to voice a whole load of audio guides for travel tours around Britain that I'd done on the side.
Yeah.
And that particular client produced audiobooks for the BBC.
Okay.
And so I did a load of work with her, and she said to me, "Oh my God, it's just an absolute joy to work with you. I work with actors, and some of them are really not good at sight reading," which wasn't used to me. I had no idea. So I did a load of work with her, and then I think I did a couple of commercials. So I had a couple of clients, but that was it. So it really was like starting from scratch and having to go out and find clients, and all that really hard work, which never stops. No. Never stops.
Do you like that aspect of working for yourself?
Sometimes, and sometimes no. I mean, it would be lovely if and they do, after all of these years, clients find me. Yeah. I'm very lucky, and people recommend me. And, I've been doing this work for a long time now, but I take nothing for granted. I never rest on my laurels. And in fact, I was advising some new freelancers the other day who were working in design, and I was saying, never ever rest on your laurels, never stop looking for clients, because clients come and they go. Over the last year, 3 clients I've been working with for years have just disappeared. They've folded because of the economy. Yeah. So you can't put all of your eggs in one basket. And I also like variety. I do a lot of corporate stuff. I do a lot of commercial stuff. But over the last couple of years, I've done some kids animation. I had the best fun ever. So if you want to keep doing more and new and different things, you need to work with a wide variety of people. So yeah, it is nice. It's interesting. It's good to work with different people. You learn things from working with different people. Yeah,
I like variety in life, and the choice of working from home or going to an office, or the types of clients you work with, the industry. So I need that to keep me interested in what I do.
I think actually interesting that you say that, because one of the hardest things I found when I first went freelance and I left a place where loads of people knew me, knew what I did, I knew them, it was suddenly just me. And I'm a motivated kind of person. I'm a disciplined sort of person, which you need to be when you're self-employed. But it's really hard at the beginning when it's just you, because you have to find some kind of structure from nowhere and from nothing. And you also have to find your own motivation, all those kinds of things. And that took a while. And obviously now there are lots of different networking groups that you can go to, and there are podcasts and all sorts of other ways of meeting people. And I so often say that the work that I do is all about human connection. And so I make sure that I go out and connect with real humans, because otherwise I could just live in my voiceover booth and sit behind a screen and edit. But I think it's really important to connect with people, because that's what the work's all about. So
I a few years ago I was in a networking group, and there was a guy that turned up. He was a voiceover artist, and he was in his booth, which has always fascinated me. And he was telling us he was doing a book reading for an audiobook, and he'd been doing it for 3 weeks constantly, and redoing things. And I think he had to do a Scottish accent at one point and things like that. And with any job, I'm sure there's whether you're a project manager or a coder or an artist, you have to keep going through times where perhaps you're not as motivated, you've been doing the same thing for a long time. Or have you had any occasions like that?
Not with the work itself. Never with work itself. I love what I do. I really genuinely love what I do. So never with the work itself. Occasionally there are weeks when I'm really tired and I am not in the right frame of mind for marketing. So there are occasions when I think, I'm just not this week. I'm just not. When you're not in the right headspace, it won't have the desired effect. So I think you have to know when to push and when to rest, whatever line of work you're in, and like in life, when to fight and when to accept.
It's an interesting way of looking at it. I suppose the pressure goes off if you accept what mindset you're in.
I think you need to, because I certainly found that if I send an email and I'm in the wrong headspace, it won't land correctly. And I'm a very intuitive sort of person, and I know people in my industry and outside of my industry who have a 1-year plan, a 6-month plan, a 2-week plan, a 5-year plan. I'm not one of those people, so I have maybe goals or aims, or I quite like to, end up kind of over there. But for me, if I plan to the nth degree, I miss a spark along the way. I miss, a nice little avenue over there. So, and the same applies to the way I work. And obviously, if I'm in the voiceover booth, I've got to get in the right headspace for that particular job or client, and I can do that. And actually, it's quite a nice escape to do that. I've had occasions when life's been really tough and I've had to go into the booth and I've had to really deliver something that demands quite a lot of energy and so on. And actually I go in thinking, how the hell am I going to do this? But I do it, and actually I get so stuck into it I forget what's going on outside the door, and it's great.
Amazing. Are there any... So one thing I found when I started doing these podcasts, which I reluctantly started, even though I wanted to do it, it was a reluctant thing, bit into my psyche there, but you watch yourself and you listen to yourself, and then you think, why, I didn't realise I asked questions like that, and that's how you need to stop doing that, because it just sounds rubbish. do you have any advice for anyone who is having to use their voice more for the business, and they want the voice to sound better when they're talking to people or giving their 30-second pitch to networking or anything like that? Is there anything that you'd say to them which might help?
I think I would say, first of all, know your material. Know exactly what it is you're going to say. And if that means memorising it, then memorize it, because the most important thing is that you connect with your audience. And if you're worrying about what you're going to say or what comes next or what order the words are in, that connection is going to be a bit dodgy. So be familiar with your material. And the most important thing I think that needs to come across is your passion for what you do or for what you're communicating or what you want to say. And I think it's useful to be able to assume that people are going to be interested. So start from a place of thinking that people are genuinely interested in what you have to say, because that will help you get over the nerves of nobody cares. So assume that they do, and that's why they're there, and that's why you've been invited or have decided this is a good thing for you to do. And I think of it also as, a lot of people hate sales. And so I think of it in terms of telling, not selling. And if you don't talk to people about what you do or tell them your story, they're not going to know.
Yeah.
And we all love stories. Yeah. Humans love stories. So again, start from that perspective. People want to hear your story because we're nosy. We want to know what makes people tick. And so maybe also include some of the really human things that will be instantly relatable. Don't go straight into the tech. Yeah. Think about what the sort of headline is that will hook somebody in. And when you have a hook that you think will draw people in, then you can think about the way you'll use your voice to do that. Maybe it's something that actually means that running up and down and getting excited and yelling a bit is right. Mostly it's not, but there are occasions when it might be. And it may be that you start off really quietly. Because actually, I find that quieter tone draws people in more quickly than if you're yelling. And I think the pace at which you speak is really important, because quite often if you're very familiar with what you're going to say, it's boring to you because it's what you do all the time. But nobody else knows what you're going to say. So you have to slow yourself down. And you have to include pauses. Pauses are really important because they give people the space and time to absorb what you're saying. So never be afraid to leave a pause. Never feel that you have to fill every single gap or silence. You don't.
Nerves can play a part in that, can't they? If you don't know what you're talking about, or like you say, you've not prepared anything. You kind of know what you want to say, but then once you get up there, your mind goes blank. Pauses become very long, and you end up talking a bit longer and a bit more stressed and a bit more. And this is what I do. Yeah, talk to me later. Yeah, that kind of thing. And,
which is why it's good to know, to have a sort of a rough pitch that you kind of carry around with yourself. This is the core of my business. This is what I do in a nutshell, and then you can add to that.
You can wing it from there.
Yeah.
I found an old school report, and it was interesting because it said that I was James is silently rebellious.
I like that.
I thought this is the best description of me I've ever come across. But so the idea of preparing something fully is not something that I like. I like to wing things because it excites me. That fear of
you're an adrenaline junkie.
Really wrong. But I'm just going to style it out. That's my kind of your 30-second things at this network really brighten my day. It's like, well,
that's great.
What they do, they don't brighten mine, I'll tell you that. Because I know people, I wing it even more then. And it's kind of, so don't know what the point of that is, but like you said, I think preparation is key.
And I certainly think in the early stages that's important. And once you become more comfortable, and the more you do it, the easier it becomes, and the more you can comfortably wing it.
Comfortably wing it. There you go, slightly rebellious, but comfortably winging it. Like that. With your business and there's been a lot of development in technology and different ways of broadcasting, and it just seems to be exploding everywhere. Different social media, different channels, different everything. How's it affected your business?
Oh, in all sorts of ways. Obviously, in terms of marketing, there are far more channels, so you have to decide which one is for you and which one isn't, because it's just me. I can only do so much. So there's that element of it, but there's also the where your voice goes, and there's the licensing that goes along with that, and the value that is placed on each particular platform, and the likely number of people who are going to hear you on that particular platform. So it's made things like quoting much more complicated than it once was. And obviously, you've touched on this in other podcasts episodes. There's the AI element, which obviously has an impact, is beginning to have an impact on the voiceover world, and there's a lot of talk around that at the moment, inevitably.
There's been the EU brought out new regulations this week, which we're talking about internally, where AI has to be flagged as AI. Which is interesting. We're always it's a great tool for developing content and things like that. It can be abused.
I have had friends and colleagues whose voices have been stolen.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And then, so how does that? Is there a legal implication of that? Has there been any talk about that?
There have been. There has been a big court case in the States over a voice that was used on TikTok, and she did win her case. There haven't been any cases over here. There are things going on, I know, with the Union Equity and with colleagues of mine. But legislation is so far behind here. It's so far behind. And obviously we're not in the EU anymore. So, they're leading the way. That's a very good point. But we have to catch up. And the difficulty in the UK is the government that we have in power at the moment wants the UK to be a leading light in AI. So they're dragging their feet, which is really difficult. It puts us in a really difficult position. And
they talk a lot about trying to... there's been a lot of predictions. AI will be as good as humans by 2030 or whatever. No one really accounts for the exponential growth of the technology, and they talk about how much each 2 years, but actually in 8 years you've got 4 years of exponential growth, where it's grown even further. So predicting this is, and then you've got a legal sector that's trying to catch up with exponential growth of technology and use, and how advanced it is. Like you say. So in the future.
Okay.
The mystic ball. Imagination. Are there any challenges that you see in the future for voiceover artists?
Well, AI is one of the big ones. It is.
Obvious.
It's the huge revolution, and we don't quite know where it's going to go. My hope really is that there will be the equivalent of the organic within voice. There will be an element of, brands, businesses sectors out there that will still demand human voices. And at the end of the day, I kind of think humans quite like working with humans. And, you don't really want to be stuck in, behind a machine all day, when actually you could have a laugh with a human. And, quite often jobs can be done in 1 or 2 takes. And would it really save any more time if you were pressing buttons and having to put in endless text to tweak the voice to get the nuance that you wanted? Probably not. So in terms of the future, that's kind of my hope, that there will still be a place for us humans in all of our, various skill sets. But we don't know, do we? We don't know. So, yeah, it's really difficult to look too far ahead at the moment, I think, James. There's so much happening, and it's happening so fast.
Very true.
Yeah.
The first podcast with Martin Williams on, who runs a copywriting business, and he said his answer to AI was, we're not really in competition against bad copy. That's not the enemy. The enemy is average content, average copy, average text, and there's so much around it. But actually, AI is being used to identify average stuff, and then you talk about, well, from that, well, what's good? What is good? What makes things good? And the realization that we had from an SEO point of view was that good AI will probably weed out a lot of average businesses and freelancers, and the good will always be used. Like the experience I had with you was we could have used AI to generate a voice over it, but actually the AI only gives me what I ask it.
Exactly. You've got to know what to ask.
It doesn't bring something back from experience which is 10 times better than what you thought it would be.
Yeah, and I guess this is the point. When you do use an expert, when you use a professional for anything, you get so much added value. I mean, I sometimes get scripts that don't make sense, that need correcting, that are badly translated, and I will help the client to make it better, because it's in all our interests to make the work as best as we can. So, yeah, I mean, 35 years comes with me, as it were. 35 years experience comes as standard. So, yeah, and also, like you mentioned earlier, you want to leave space for that extra spark, those unexpected things that might come into the mix when you wing it. It's the same in a voiceover session, and or with a writer or whatever. If you work with somebody who has expertise, allow them to use that expertise and trust them. When you trust somebody, you get more from them than if you micromanage. Sure. And you might just get something that you really weren't expecting, but that actually completely lights the whole thing up.
Yeah. Very interesting. If anyone is listening to this that would like to get in contact with you or find out where you are, how would they go about doing that?
I'm everywhere. So my website is sarastarling.co.uk, no H. I'm spelt Sara, but I'm Sarah, which confuses a lot of people. And then my email is mail@sarastarling.co.uk, and you'll find me on LinkedIn most commonly, on Instagram, on Facebook, and I'm a bit on X, but not really.
Well, thank you for coming on. It's been fascinating.
It's a pleasure.
I knew it would be. And it's been a pleasure to have you on our 10th episode.
Thank you very much for having me. It's an honour.
Right, with that.